Hello everyone, and welcome back to Game Easy, Roll Good. And today, well, actually earlier this week, Wizards of the Coast released a new Unearthed Arcana that is for horror-themed subclasses, so a lot of spooky themes along these subclasses. Many of them are sort of reworks or slight revisions to subclasses that already exist. But we also do have two new subclasses, as you can see on the screen here. We're going to take a look at those in this video, and I'm going to split these ones up across multiple videos. I know I normally dump these all in one big, long video, but I also do want to use this as sort of an opportunity to sort of get ahead of myself on videos. So I'm not trying to get everything out sort of at the last minute, so to speak. Give myself a little bit of breathing room. So I will be releasing these a little bit at a time, just to give myself the opportunity to do that. And today I just thought that we would start with the new subclasses. I have seen a lot of people releasing videos about the revised hexblade. I haven't had the time to watch any of them. It's kind of funny when you start making content, you kind of lose the time to watch the other content creators that you usually used to watch. But today we're just going to talk about the new subclasses. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into it. So starting with the Reanimator Artificer, we're going to look at the intro text here. It says that you reassemble corpses to raise the dead, which, you know, it's very much sort of a Frankenstein sort of it's alive sort of thing. It says reanimators defy the laws of nature in pursuit of gruesome experiment. These grim artificers stitch together servants from disparate corpses, use foul magic to strengthen the living, and transform the art of necromancy into a terrifying curse. So one thing I noticed reading through this Unearthed Arcana and kind of throughout the 2024 intro texts to all the subclasses in general is that they're doing kind of a lot better at making that intro text tell us what does this subclass do in kind of a very sort of general broad sense. So obviously by this time I've made all these slides already, but when I'm taking these notes, I'm doing one slide at a time. So when I read this, I was like, okay, my guess is that this is probably going to give us some sort of modular companion because we are sort of, you know, it's sort of like a build a zombie workshop. I would imagine that's going to give us some support spells and or some support features, as well as maybe some debuffs, spells or features. So how did we do? So if we look at the Reanimator spells, this is our first subclass feature that we get at level 3. We have a list of spells here that are unlocked at each Artificer level that you can see there on the left-hand side. Once you reach that level in Artificer, these spells always count as prepared, and per the rules in the 2024 Player's Handbook, those spells count as Artificer spells for you because they are granted to you by an Artificer feature. So we have spells like False Life, Spare the Dying, and Witch Bolt at level 3, all very thematic. Blindness and Deafness and Enhance Ability at level 5, so that's a debuff like I mentioned before, as well as a buff like I mentioned before. So it's definitely hitting those notes as to what the theme of the subclass is. At level 9, of course, we have Animate Dead and Lightning Bolt. These are our 3rd level spells. Again, both great picks. Level 13 sees Blight and Death Ward as 4th level spells. And level 17, when the Artificer finally gets access to 5th level spells, we have Anti-Life Shell as well as Raise Dead. So again, Raise Dead is actually a pretty good one because it's not you don't create like an undead. It is a resurrection type of spell. It just has a weird name. So you do have that party support. You do have a little bit of debuffing the enemies. You have protecting your own life with things like False Life, Death Ward, Animate Dead for creating more zombies, things like that. Witch Bolt and Lightning Bolt very thematic with, you know, striking lightning to bring things to life. So if someone gave me that description of the Reanimator Artificer, that intro text, and then asked me to make a spell list of what the Reanimator spell list would look like, it would probably look very, very similar to this. False Life is maybe the weakest pick, but it is thematic. And really, I don't think much of anything here is a miss. So this is a very, very strong showing to begin with for the Reanimator Artificer. Moving on to the second level 3 feature, we have Jolt to Life. This says when you cast Spare the Dying, which remember we have always prepared through the Reanimator spell list, it says you can modify the spell so that it sends a jolt of electricity through the target, reviving it. The target gains 1 hit point, and each creature within a 10-foot emanation originating from the target makes a dexterity saving throw against your spell save DC, taking lightning damage equal to 1d4 plus half your Artificer level rounded up on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. You can modify the spell this way a number of times equal to your intelligence modifier, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. I'm just kind of bolding key points, like when I'm scanning through a feature, these are the kind of things that I kind of pick up on. And so basically this is an entire class feature based around using Spare the Dying to just kind of pop a creature up. So normally Spare the Dying just stabilizes a downed creature at 0 hit points, but meaning that they don't need to make death saving throws anymore. Whereas this one is basically allowing you to defibrillate them, you know, a number of times equal to your intelligence modifier per long rest, bring them back to 1 hit point, deal a little bit of damage to a bunch of creatures around them, and then they can get back up on their turn. Hopefully it works out where the timing in the turn means that they get to go before another enemy gets to go. Otherwise they're just going to get dropped again. So while I'm I'm not usually a fan of features that are built around, you know, myself or an ally dying. This is, of course, super flavorful for the subclass. The only thing I might change about it is that the emanation would affect each creature of your choice around that target, just in case there's other allies within range. You don't want them also taking the electric damage. But other than that, this is a pretty good feature, and it is kind of just a ribbon, and essentially. There's still one more feature at level 3 that is sort of the bread and butter for the Reanimator. And speaking of that feature, let's go ahead and talk about it. We're looking at the Reanimated Companion. So it says, using Tinker tools or another type of Artisan's tools with which you have proficiency, you can take a magic action to create a Reanimated Companion, and we'll look at the stat block in a second, through the power of Necromancy and Science. The companion manifests in an unoccupied space within 5 feet of you. You determine the companion's appearance. Your choices don't affect the companion's game statistics. So you can choose whatever it looks like, which will be important for something we'll mention in a bit, but it doesn't change its statistics for any reason, which makes perfect sense, of course. Companion is friendly to you and your allies, and it obeys you. It lasts until you finish a long rest or until you take a magic action to dismiss it early, at which point it harmlessly collapses into a pile of viscera. It immediately drops to 0 hit points and dies, triggering its Death Burst trait, which again we'll look at in a second, if you die. So if you die, it drops to 0 hit points as well, and then explodes per the feature that's in its stat block. Once you create a companion, you can't do so again until you finish a long rest or expend a spell slot to create one. You can only have one companion at a time, and you can't create one while your companion is present. If you have a companion and you want to make a new one because maybe this one is almost dead for whatever reason, you basically need to use your magic action to dismiss it early, at which point again it harmlessly collapses into a pile of viscera, and then you need to use your magic action again on the next turn to use a spell slot to recreate one. You can't resummon one while another one is still alive. Finally, it says the companion in combat. In combat, the companion acts during your turn. It can move and take a reaction on its own, but the only action it can take is the dodge action unless you take a bonus action to command it to take an action. If you have the incapacitated condition, the companion acts on its own and isn't limited to the dodge action. So this is all pretty standard fare for the way a lot of companions work in 2024. It can move and take its own reaction. You need to use your bonus action to command it to do something. That's all pretty similar for non-concentration companions. Another cool thing here is that because we can spend a spell slot of any level to recreate one, that means that as the stronger that the companion gets, the more sort of efficient using the lower level spell slots to resummon one is. It might be just a better use of our low level spell slots eventually, because it's just going to be doing so many more things than any of our first level spell slots could. A lot of the Artificer features kind of work this way, so it's nice to see that that is continuing within the Reanimator as well. Additionally, it's also just very cool that it acts on your turn. That is significant for 2 reasons. 1, it's just easier to strategize around, and 2, because we can determine the appearance of the creature, it could potentially operate as a mount. That of course depends on its size, but again, we get to choose what its appearance looks like. So if it is a mountable shape and of the appropriate size, and we could potentially use this as a mount, which is also just kind of a very popular take on the Battlesmith with the Battlesmith's companion as well. I know some people I've read used that as a mount as well. So with that aside, let's go ahead and take a look at the actual stat block. So we're looking at it here. It is a small undead with neutral alignment. It gets an AC equal to 10 plus your intelligence modifier, so basically a max of 15 in most cases. Its hit points are equal to 4 plus 4 times your Artificer level. It has a number of hit dice in D6s equal to your Artificer level. It has pretty, middling stats, nothing surprising for a companion. It is resistant to necrotic and poison, immune to lightning damage, as well as the charmed condition, the exhaustion condition, as well as the poisoned condition. It has blind sight to 60 feet, which is actually pretty incredible. I actually didn't notice that at first. Passive perception of 10, that's fine. Its proficiency bonus equals your proficiency bonus. It is a stat block, so I'm not surprised that it calls it out, but you might also notice that it doesn't get proficiency in anything, or nor does it add your proficiency bonus to anything, such as, it doesn't get your proficiency bonus to certain saving throws or to certain skill checks. There's nothing like that either in this stat block or anywhere else in this class. So whatever its proficiency bonus is doesn't really matter to anything on this stat block, nor does it matter to anything else in this subclass. That isn't really a big deal. It's just something I wanted to point out. If we look at its traits, we have the Death Burst effect. We've seen this one mentioned already when it drops to 0 hit points. This causes a dexterity saving throw against each creature within a 10-foot emanation originating from the companion. On a failure, they take 2d6 necrotic damage, and again, this is against your spell save DC as the Artificer. It also has a trait called Lightning Absorption. It says whenever this companion is subjected to lightning damage, it regains a number of hit points equal to the lightning damage dealt. And then for its actions, it just has a Dreadful Swipe. This is a melee attack roll. The bonus equals your spell attack modifier as the Artificer. It has a reach of 5 feet, normal range. It deals damage equal to 1d4 plus 2 plus your intelligence modifier in necrotic damage, and the target can't make opportunity attacks until the start of its next turn. So you'll notice I have a few things highlighted here. First thing is that it's small, which means that it's not possible to mount at this size unless you're somehow playing a tiny creature. So we'll have to see if there are any other features features later on that increase the companion size. The fact that it has resistances to necrotic and poison, and especially the fact that it's immune to lightning, as well as maybe the poisoned or even exhaustion condition. There's lots of possible utility, especially in combat. The fact that it has hit dice means that it can restore its own hit points during short rests or with other spells like Wither and Bloom. The Death Burst trait doesn't have a save for half, which is fine, but it's just something I wanted to point out. The lightning absorption is kind of actually insane because Shocking Grasp is also on the Artificer spell list, which means if you just pick that up as a cantrip, you can keep your reanimated companion topped off, outside of combat. If it survives through combat, you can just fill it up by shocking it a bunch. That's, pretty enormously powerful. During combat, you have Lightning Bolt as well as the Artificer once you reach level 9 per the Reanimator spell list, so you can just cast a Lightning Bolt, straight through them and through a bunch of enemies as well and heal your companion and deal damage to all the enemies. So there's a lot of powerful combinations there. Shocking Grasp is maybe too powerful. There's never been a companion-based class, to my knowledge, where it's so easy to keep that companion topped up between combats. I can't imagine they didn't consider Shocking Grasp, but it's possible that they just forgot that that spell exists when including that trait on this companion. Speaking of Shocking Grasp, the Dreadful Swipe does have a Shocking Grasp type effect where creatures hit by that lose their ability to take opportunity attacks, which not only just makes you more mobile, but your allies more mobile as well as your companion. It's basically almost just as good as having flyby on your owl familiars. So moving on to level 5, we have a feature called Strange Modifications. It says whenever you create a reanimated companion, it gains one of the following options of your choice, and you choose this when you create the companion. I feel like that's a little redundant to whenever you create a reanimated companion. Those two things mean the same things to me, but you can choose either between Arcane Conduit, which says you can cast spells as though you were in your companion's space, but you must use your own senses. Once per turn, when you cast an Artificer spell from the Evocation or Necromancy schools and deal damage while your companion is within 120 feet of you, a lot of conditions there, you can add your intelligence modifier to 1 damage roll of that spell. Pretty decent. This doesn't work with something like Magic Missile anymore in 2024 because Magic Missile is now you roll separately for each beam, whereas the 2014 rules you rolled once for all beams at the same time. So you can't quite milk it that way. Of course, I don't think Magic Missile is even on the Artificer spell list, so you wouldn't be able to do that anyway. The second option is called Ferocity. It says when you command your companion to take the Dreadful Swipe action, the companion can use it twice. So again, you can use your bonus action to command your companion to take an action. If they take the attack action, then they're going to use their Dreadful Swipe action. So when you command them to do that, they basically get the extra attack function, and they can make 2 attacks with that Dreadful Swipe. So being able to cast through the companion is pretty cool. It's kind of similar to the Order of Scribes wizard that can cast through that sort of disembodied spellbook. A little extra damage doesn't hurt. Ferocity, like I said, is basically just extra attack, but remember that their attack on hit denies opportunity attacks from that creature, which means, again, it's just making your companion way more mobile, making you way more mobile if you're kind of up in melee range, as well as just making your companions way more mobile. Works extra good with effects like Booming Blade, where you want that creature to try to have to move towards you. So if your companion, you and your allies can all freely move away from that target, you can really kind of milk strategies where you need the enemies to move towards you, especially if that enemy doesn't really have any good ranged attack options. Overall, these level 5 features are pretty soft, but I think that's pretty common for Artificer or subclasses in general. They're still useful, just not anything incredible, but again, that's kind of what I would have expected. Moving on to the level 9 subclass feature, we have Improved Reanimation. This one says you experiment and alter your companion further. Whenever you create a reanimated companion, it gains one of the following options of your choice. Choose when you create the companion. Again, I think that's a little bit of redundant text, but you have a choice between bloated, gaunt, or moist. I know the moment I read the word moist, I know that probably triggered some people. The bloated feature says the companion becomes large or medium, your choice. Whenever it hits a large or smaller creature with its Dreadful Swipe action, that creature can also be pushed up to 10 feet away from that companion. Additionally, you can add your intelligence modifier to the damage dealt by the companion's Death Burst. So that's the bloated feature. The gaunt feature says that the companion's speed increases 45 feet. It gains a climb speed equal to its speed. It can climb difficult surfaces, including along ceilings, without needing to make an ability check. In addition, whenever a creature of your choice starts its turn within a 10-foot emanation originating from your companion, the creature must succeed a wisdom saving throw against your spell save DC or have the frightened condition until the start of its next turn. Finally, we have the moist feature. This says that the companion gains a swim speed equal to its speed. In addition, whenever the companion is hit by an attack roll from a creature within 10 feet of it, so whenever the companion is hit, not whenever it hits another creature, the attacker takes acid damage equal to your intelligence modifier. So some key notes that stood out to me here. One, being able to make it large or medium means that it can be used as a mount if you are medium or small respectively. Additionally, while it's in this bloated form, again, it has that ability to push when it hits with its Dreadful Swipe action, and we know how good pushing can be based on a few videos that I've released recently about pushing creatures into other creature spaces and kind of going bowling with them. And this doesn't even say that it's once per turn, so you could potentially do this up to twice if you use that Ferocity option from the previous feature. The Frightening Aura from the Gaunt feature does say that it can only affect creatures of your choice when they start their turn within 10 feet of it. That just kind of has some interesting sort of like fun roleplay choices. Obviously, this is just meant to exclude your allies, but overall, I think there's just a lot of cool things you could do with that in very certain circumstances. Everything here is kind of cool, no real notes. So let's go ahead and move on to the capstone for the Reanimator Artificer, and that is Promethean Reanimation. It says you have mastered the science of revivification, granting you the following benefits. First, you have facilitated revival. Whenever you cast Revivify or Raise Dead, the cost of any material components needed for that spell is halved. That's pretty straightforward. Revivify is on the Artificer spell list, so you can already have that one prepared. Raise Dead is on the Reanimator subclass spell list, so once you have access to that one, you will always have it prepared. The next benefit that you get is called Improved Companion. It says the damage of your reanimated companion's death burst increases to 4d6. This is originally 2d6, so it doubles. Additionally, the necrotic damage dealt by your companion ignores resistance, so that is not only its dreadful strike, its normal melee attack, but death burst is also necrotic damage, so that would also ignore resistance. Finally, you get a feature called Life Transfer. It says you can siphon the animating magic out of the companion to bolster yourself. Whenever you take damage, you can take a reaction to cause your reanimated companion to drop to 0 hit points. The companion immediately dies, triggering its death burst trait, and you regain a number of hit points equal to your Artificer level. So this is the first sort of Reanimator trait that basically just gives you all of the benefits. You know, the level 5 and 9 features basically made you choose between certain traits, and those traits only benefited your companion. For these benefits, you get all 3 of them. Only one of them really affects your companion. I do think that this feels maybe a little underwhelming as far as Artificer subclass capstones go, but that's kind of fine. I mean, it is still good. It just feels like that many of the features before this one were more exciting. I do like the fact that like Improved Companion plus Life Transfer gives you sort of a corpse explosion effect. I don't think that the Death Burst does so much damage that I'd be looking to do that often, especially since it requires me to use a spell slot to bring that companion back up. But that is just sort of a fun thing that you could do that we could never really do before. There wasn't like a corpse explosion spell that existed, at least not, you know, per the actual rules of the game. But overall, I mean, again, this is a solid capstone. So is the Unearthed Arcana Reanimator Artificer any good? I think this looks like a ton of fun. The only thing I can't imagine going in unchanged, if at all, is the lightning absorption on the companion, because again, you can just pick up Shocking Grasp and immediately top up your companion. There's just never really been a companion that can be healed that easily. They even took that away from the Battlesmith Artificer, assuming that they didn't put that into the published version that is coming out in August. But I remember in the Unearthed Arcana, you could not heal the Battlesmith's companion with mending. Again, we don't know if they changed that back yet, but assuming that they didn't, I can't imagine that they would allow this here. Generally speaking, I think it's a little annoying that this seems like a better designed Necromancer than the Necromancy Wizard. And speaking of that, where is the Necromancer? If it's going to be horror themed subclasses, it feels like a huge miss, and I imagine a lot of people have the same opinion that the Necromancer Wizard should have been in here. We would have loved to see what a rework of the Necromancer Wizard looks like. I'm hoping a little bit that for all of the missing subclasses that were previously available, that they'll release them in more of a, if you remember from like the 3.5 edition, that they had like the Complete Arcane, the Complete Divine, and Complete Warrior, that were basically just books that contained like extra subclasses and, you know, new spells and different ways to use the caster classes and martial classes and divine spellcasting classes. I think that would be a cool way to re-release all of the missing subclasses from, you know, pre-2024. That is the Reanimator Artificer. I think it looks like a ton of fun. I would probably greenlight most of this. I might call out Lightning Absorption as maybe being a little goofy, but otherwise I would say it's pretty much ready to go. So with that aside, let's move on to the Hollow Warden Ranger. So the intro text on this one says you can draw on the might of ancient wild terrors. As legends tell that the most ancient and fearsome terrors lurk deep and within the old places of the earth, unfathomable and bloodthirsty entities of fallow soil and sharpened claws. Hollow Wardens venerate and draw power from such beings, transforming themselves into similarly merciless and monstrous guardians that stalk along the jagged coastlines, across steep mountain crags, and through dark and wild places. So again, at the 2024 intro text to subclasses, it's supposed to be doing a better job of telling us what the subclass is about. Is this a lycanthropy-based ranger subclass? That was sort of my initial impression. That's the first question I asked myself when I read this intro text, and I hadn't watched the sort of press release video about it. So looking at the first level 3 feature for the Hollow Warden, we're looking at the Hollow Warden spells table. So when you reach Ranger level 3, you get Wrathful Smite. Level 5 Ranger, you get Spike Growth. Level 9 Ranger, you get Phantom Steed. Level 13 Ranger, Hallucinatory Terrain. And level 17, you get Awaken. My initial impressions from this is that Wrathful Smite suggests that Wizards of the Coast intends this to be a melee-based Ranger subclass. Spike Growth plus Phantom Steed, it can just cause for some very, very silly combinations, but those are both great spells, and I'm not really sad to see either of them there. Again, I included the sort of Headless Horseman picture from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft specifically for that purpose. Hallucinatory Terrain seems like a little bit of an odd pick before seeing the rest of the subclass, and again, after seeing the rest of the subclass, it still seems like a little bit of an odd pick. However, after watching the sort of press release video for it, they did say that this is supposed to be kind of based on just cryptids in general and any sort of thing, but if you imagine sort of like if you've seen explain the Blair Witch Project and how they sort of get lost in the woods because things seem to sort of change around them, or they seem to go in circles even though they are confident they weren't going in circles. I think that's kind of what hallucinatory terrain is supposed to be there for. And then of course I think Awaken is just fun. Moving on to the other level 3 feature, we have Wrath of the Wild. This is sort of the key feature for the Hollow Warden subclass. It says you draw on the strange and ancient horrors of the land for power. When you cast Hunter's Mark, you transform, gaining the following benefits for the duration of the spell. First, you get Ancient Armor. You gain a bonus to your AC equal to your Wisdom modifier, minimum of 1. Your body is wreathed in rotten bark or beastly bristles. Secondly, you also get Unnerving Aura. When an enemy starts its turn within a 10-foot emanation originating from you, it makes a Wisdom saving throw against your spell save DC. On a failed save, it can either take an action or a bonus action on this turn, not both. And then it says your shadow lengthens and twists around you, or you sprout unnatural growths like bloody antlers or putrid fangs. So my initial sort of reaction to reading this feature was that the growing dependency on Hunter's Mark among Ranger subclasses is a little concerning. You know, the base class isn't really going to change at this point. It's not really worth bringing up that sort of contention at all. But however, we saw that like I think it was the Hunter subclass that was released with 2024 had at least one feature that was based on Hunter's Mark. Now we're seeing that the core feature for a subclass is based around using Hunter's Mark as well. So not only does your base class want to use Hunter's Mark all the time, but now you have this subclass that wants to use Hunter's Mark all the time. So it kind of feels like they're maybe trying to justify why a ranger should be casting a level 1 concentration spell at higher levels. You know, the additional bonus to AC is certainly a reason to do that. A big aura around you is certainly a reason to do that. You're basically just making that first level spell a bigger and better spell. I do kind of like the idea that you could potentially maintain this transformation for up to 8 or even 24 hours, depending on how much you upcast the Hunter's Mark spell, because the duration lasts longer depending on what level you cast it at. I will say that just sort of on the surface, the AC feels like a bit much. Rangers already have a decent AC with medium armor. They can also equip shields. They can get fighting styles, which I believe they can still get the defensive fighting style to get another +1 AC. So having an unconditional bonus, unconditional other than the fact that you should be concentrating on Hunter's Mark, feels like it's pushing the limits on what they might normally allow. So again, the fact that it's based around Hunter's Mark, a little bit concerning, but let's hold out for the rest of the features. So moving on to our level 7 features, we have Hungering Might. It says you gain a bonus to Constitution saving throws equal to your Wisdom modifier, minimum of 1. In addition, once per turn, when you hit a creature with an attack roll while you are transformed using Wrath of the Wild, you regain a number of hit points equal to 1d10 plus your Wisdom modifier, provided you are bloodied when you hit. So my impressions, again, adding Wisdom to your con save is actually pretty nice, especially since it's not tied to your transformation. I think that is a very important distinction. You just generally add your Wisdom modifier to your Constitution saving throws. And it's not just Constitution saving throws to maintain concentration, although that is also true. It is all Constitution saving throws. So if you get hit with a spell like a Cone of Cold or something like that, or you get like poison damage or something like that you need to make a Constitution saving throw against, you get the Wisdom bonus to that as well. It is not here explicitly for the purpose of allowing you to maintain concentration on Hunter's Mark, but that is a side benefit of it. Of course, it's also then protecting your concentration on all of your Ranger spells. So even though the major features of this subclass are built around Hunter's Mark, you do have at least this feature that is saying, hey, you're going to be really good at keeping concentration on your spells. So even if you're not using Hunter's Mark to enable all these other features of the subclass, we still have this one feature that helps the bunch of other things that you can do as a Ranger, whether it's like maintaining concentration on Pass Without Trace, Spike Growth, whatever concentration spell that you're using as a Ranger. The Healing While Bloodied feels pretty right. I would say normally 1d10 plus your modifier per turn would feel like a lot if it were all the time, but considering that it's only while bloodied and only while transformed, feels like a pretty appropriate amount. Moving on to the next feature at level 11, they have a feature called Rot in Violence. This says your dedication to Eldritch Forest beings alters you further. When transformed using Wrath of the Wild, you gain the following additional benefits. So you're not picking one, you do get both of these things. First things first, you get Eerie Aura. When a creature fails its saving throw against your Unnerving Aura, it also takes necrotic, poison, or psychic damage, your choice, equal to your Ranger level. This damage ignores resistance. Secondly, you get Strangling Roots. When you hit a creature with an attack roll using a weapon, you can activate the Sap or Slow Mastery property in addition to a different mastery property you're using with that weapon. So we're back on the transformation train. I'm not really surprised by that. Having this Eerie Aura, this damaging aura, is actually pretty cool. The damage equal to your Ranger level that ignores resistance, that might be a bit much. It feels like they're really trying to justify, again, casting Hunter's Mark. Even the Storm Herald Barbarian, which also has a sort of an aura during its rage, or has a modal aura, one of which does damage around it during the rage, that aura isn't anywhere near as strong. Of course, you're not concentrating on rage or anything like that. There's other things to consider as a balancing effect as well. Again, it is a very cool feature. I think they probably just intentionally overtuned this one. And then Sap and Slow, they aren't the greatest masteries, but again, we've discussed in previous videos about slowing down creatures as well that there are no really good melee weapons that have the slow mastery. However, because now we can attach the slow mastery in addition to whichever the mastery of the weapon that we have. If we attach that to a slashing weapon and then take these slasher feet, if you want to be able to build around slowing down enemies quite a bit, you can put those two things together and they work together pretty well. Finally, moving on to the Hollow Warden capstone, we have a feature called Ancient Endurance. It says you become wholly suffused with the forest's ancient power, granting you the following benefits. First, you have a feature called Persistent Hunt. If you drop to 0 hit points while transformed using Wrath of the Wild and you don't die outright, you can expend a 4th level or higher spell slot, no action required. Your hit points then change to an amount equal to 5 times the level of the spell slot expended. You basically have a cheat death effect while you're within that wild transformation, assuming that you expend a 4th level or higher spell slot to do so. You also have a feature called Timeless that says you have immunity to the exhaustion condition. So first impressions, again, only the first feature here is dependent on being transformed, and at this level we can't lose concentration on Hunter's Mark via damage, so we can maintain it for a very long time if we choose to even upcast it. We can do it for 8 hours and have this ongoing effect. Outside of the number of available 4th or 5th level spell slots, you don't have any limit on how many times you can use Persistent Hunt. Timeless, again, giving us immunity to exhaustion. I think that's a very clear sign that WotC designed this subclass just for me, because clearly they know how much I hate the 2024 version of exhaustion. So thank you, Wizards of the Coast. I know this is a pretty cool subclass. I'm glad that you designed it just for me. You know, Rangers do already get the ability to reduce their exhaustion level by 1 after a short rest by this level. But if this goes to production, if you have immunity to exhaustion plus high con saves from the feature that gives us wisdom to our con saves at all times as well, plus the self-healing while bloodied while transformed, makes that whole Sickening Radiance sort of microwave combo a very, very tempting thing to try to do with this subclass, because again, you're immune to exhaustion, you have high con saves, so you're very likely to make the save against the Sickening Radiance, and 2, you're able to heal up with attacking while bloodied, which means that you can sort of offset the damage that you take from Sickening Radiance, even more so if you're also able to find resistance to radiant damage. Very, very interesting possible combo there, assuming that this goes in as is. So the question finally is the Unearthed Arcana Hollow Warden Ranger any good? And I actually think this is pretty good. Again, seeing the dependency on Hunter's Mark off the bat did give me a lot of pause. And even though this subclass really does double and triple down on the transformation, I think even just the plus wisdom to all con saves is a huge boon for the overall Ranger. Because again, we have all these other concentration spells that we could be using. Sure, we don't transform while using them, but these spells have bigger and better effects usually. So I am perfectly fine with that sort of trade-off. Again, if you're going to build a subclass around one particular thing, especially if it's a concentration spell, a low-level concentration spell, I'm looking at you, Hexblade, you kind of need to throw the other features of that class a bone in some way. And something like that is just enough where I feel like, you know what, I can forgive the rest of these features being built around Hunter's Mark. So, and not only do we have that, but we have the immunity to exhaustion. That's also independent from the transformations. So both of those things really work for the base Ranger. I have a feeling that they might dial back on some of these numbers, like the unconditional AC bonus might be something where it says you can maintain this bonus as long as you aren't wearing a shield. You might compare this to something like the Blade Song that gets their intelligence to their armor class, but again, the Blade Song wizard can't use a shield during Blade Song, and not only that, but they have lower AC anyway, usually, because it's difficult to focus on your armor class as a wizard. I wouldn't be surprised if they lowered the healing from Hungering Mike, like maybe just lowering the base dice to like a 1d8 or maybe even a 1d6. And I'd probably expect them to also lower the damage output from Rot and Violence. The fact that that is damage equal to your Ranger level, again, feels like a lot. And again, I'm not saying that I want to see any of these things. I think they should just send this as is because it's so powerful and looks so much fun. But it just feels, again, like they're intentionally over-tuning these features to kind of gauge how much we as the players react to it, how much we as the players feel like we need to get from a spell like Hunter's Mark before we feel justified in casting it even at higher levels. I think they accomplished that with this subclass, but I also feel like they're going to dial it back, if that makes sense. So what do you think about that? Do you think that all of these features justify using Hunter's Mark at higher levels? Like, you do have sort of a point blank AoE around you with it as well once you get to Rot and Violence. Do you think that the big bonus to your Constitution saves against all of your Constitution saves while not transformed supports your other features as a Ranger enough to feel like, okay, I can forgive all these other features being built around Hunter's Mark? I do feel like this subclass does it a lot better than another subclass like the Hexblade, which again we'll talk about in a future video. But I want to know what you think about everything that we covered in this video, whether it be the Reanimator Artificer, which again, very cool subclass. I imagine there might be some nerfs, but I think it's pretty much ready to go as is. I imagine they'll tune some numbers down on the Hollow Warden Ranger, but again, I think it's pretty good to go as is otherwise. So go on and head down to those comments and let me know what you think. And while you're going down to those comments, please hit that like button. If you like what you saw from me and you want to see more of my opinions, especially as we're going to be covering the Unearthed Arcana, please consider hitting that subscribe button, especially if you are a new or returning viewer to this channel and you haven't hit that subscribe button yet. It really helps support the channel and I appreciate it quite a bit. I release videos every Wednesday and Sunday, so you always have something to look forward to. I appreciate your time and I'll see you in the next one.